Hi, I'm Miss Ginsburg with KnowAtom, and today we're going to be reading Earth's Changing Climate. This is a lab manual in Unit 3. Section 1. Temperatures on Earth. Sugar maple trees. Every spring, some people in eastern Canada and the northern parts of the central and eastern United States wait for the weather to warm up so it is just below freezing. As soon as this happens, these people head into the woods. This is because this temperature is the ideal time to go tapping. Tapping refers to the process of collecting sap from maple trees. Sap is a fluid made up of water, dissolved sugars, minerals, and vitamins. It is a primary ingredient in maple syrup, so people who make maple syrup depend on maple trees producing sap. May your sap run strong and sweet is a common way that maple sugar producers say, good luck. Maple trees depend on the temperature differences caused by seasons, periods of time characterized by specific weather patterns and by the length of day and night. When temperatures drop below freezing in late fall and winter, pressure within the trees decreases. This causes the tree to draw in water through its roots. As winter turns into spring, night tends to remain cold, but temperatures during the day are warmer. This temperature difference creates pressure that pushes water down to the bottom of the tree. This causes the tree's sap to flow. Because they depend on cold winters and warmer springs, maple trees are found primarily in latitudes that experience the four seasons: fall, winter, spring, and summer. Latitude is a measurement of a location's position relative to the equator. The equator's latitude is 0 degrees, while the pole's latitude is 90 degrees. How Earth is heated. A location's latitude plays an important role in its temperature. Temperature is a measure of heat. It is measured with a thermometer. This goes back to Earth's position in the solar system relative to the sun. The sun is the primary source of energy on Earth. Its energy is transferred to Earth's atmosphere and surfaces through radiation, which is heat transfer that occurs without contact between the heat source and the object heated. But Earth's surface isn't heated evenly. Remember that the sun's rays are the most concentrated around the equator. Moving north or south of the equator, the sun's rays are spread over a larger area, so each square meter of Earth's surface receives less solar energy. This is because of the angle of the sun's rays as they strike Earth's curved surface. Near the equator, the sun's rays hit Earth at close to a 90-degree angle. This means that the sun's energy is concentrated within a small surface area. On Earth, this results in warm temperatures at the equator. At higher latitudes, the angle that the sun's rays hit Earth is lower due to Earth's curved shape. This causes the sun's energy to be spread over a larger surface area, which results in lower overall temperatures north and south of the equator. Picture a flashlight. When you shine a flashlight directly at the ground, the light hits the ground at a 90-degree angle. This causes the light to be concentrated within a small area. If you angle the flashlight, the light on the ground spreads out and becomes less concentrated because it covers a larger area. Latitude isn't the only factor that influences temperature. As Earth orbits the sun, the amount of sunlight that reaches the planet changes over a year because of Earth's tilt, which always points in the same direction, toward the North Star. As a result, the sun heats some parts of Earth more than others throughout the year. For example, when the North Pole is tilted away from the sun, it is winter in the northern hemisphere because the sun's rays are less concentrated in this region. At the same time, nights are longer and days are shorter. As Earth continues to orbit the sun throughout the year, the sun's rays gradually hit the northern hemisphere at a higher angle. This results in spring, longer days, and the beginning of sap flowing from the maple trees. This is why maple trees grow in temperate climates where there are 4 seasons: summer, fall, winter, and spring. Different regions have different seasons. Tropical regions near the equator experience 2 seasons, the wet season and the dry season. Because the sun's rays shine directly on the equator year-round, it never gets cold enough for winter. These regions also experience about 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night all year. Polar regions near the North and South Poles experience 2 seasons every year, winter and summer. When summer comes to the poles, there is daylight for almost 24 hours a day. In some locations, the sun never sets and it is light for a full 24 hours. This is called midnight sun. When winter comes to one of the poles, it is tilted away from the sun. As a result, this pole experiences polar night when the sun never rises above the horizon. Another cause of Earth's uneven heating is the planet's different surfaces. Earth is constantly being warmed by the sun, but snow-covered land, forests, oceans, polar ice caps, and cities all absorb energy from the sun differently. Earth's ability to reflect the sun's light is called albedo. Albedo is influenced by the color, type, and texture of various surfaces. Dark-colored surfaces, such as oceans and forests, reflect very little solar energy. Picture the blacktop on a newly paved road on a hot summer day. Its dark color makes it a strong absorber, so little of the sun's energy is reflected away. Instead, that energy is absorbed as thermal energy. This causes the road to become hotter. In contrast, the polar ice caps act like mirrors. They reflect a large amount of energy from the sun back into space. This results in minimal heating of the surface and lower atmosphere. Ice covers 3% of Earth's surface and is the world's largest supply of fresh water. As ice melts, it becomes liquid water. Liquid water absorbs more thermal energy than ice. Therefore, as ice caps and glaciers melt, Earth's temperature becomes warmer because there is less ice to reflect the sun's heat. In the map below, the colors show the albedo over Earth's land surfaces ranging from 0 to 0.81. The higher the percentages, the higher albedo the surface has. For example, reds and purples on the map have a high albedo, around 0.63 to 0.81. This means these surfaces reflect a lot of energy. Blues show surfaces that absorb more energy, with a low albedo of 0.18 or lower. Yellow and green surfaces that are in the middle, absorbing some light and reflecting some light. Heat powers the cycling of water. As the map of Earth's albedo shows, the majority of the sun's energy is absorbed by the ocean. When enough thermal energy is transferred to the water, liquid water will evaporate into the atmosphere. Evaporation is the process of liquid water changing into water vapor, its gas state. Water evaporates when enough thermal energy is present. Like all liquids, the atoms and molecules that make up liquid water are less tightly packed than they are in a solid. They are in constant contact with one another, but they have enough energy to slide past one another. This is why matter in a liquid state takes the shape of its container, but has no shape of its own. All water on Earth is part of a system called the hydrosphere. Remember that a system is a set of connected, interacting parts that form a more complex whole. Earth is so massive and so complex that scientists study smaller systems to better understand how everything works. There are 4 main Earth systems: the hydrosphere, atmosphere, geosphere, and biosphere. Sugar maple trees are part of the biosphere. This system includes all living things on Earth. Maple trees depend on the hydrosphere because all living things need water to survive. As maple trees transpire, they interact with the atmosphere. The atmosphere is the mixture of gases, dust, water vapor, and other molecules above Earth's crust. Living things also interact with the geosphere. The geosphere is made up of Earth's landforms, including rocks and soil. Living things depend on all of the other systems for survival. At the same time, living things impact their surroundings as they breathe air, drink water, and live on Earth's surface. Once water evaporates from Earth's surface, it moves into the atmosphere. There is always water in the atmosphere. Cold liquid water can also evaporate if the air above it isn't already full of water vapor. About 90% comes from evaporation from bodies of water, while the other 10% comes from plant transpiration, the process of water moving through plants from their roots to their leaves, where it is released back to the atmosphere as water vapor. Remember the sugar maple trees. Their roots absorb water from the soil. They use some of the water to function, store some of it, and release the rest back to the atmosphere through transpiration. When living things die and their bodies decompose, the water they've stored in their bodies returns to Earth's surface. Water vapor in the atmosphere transfers some of its thermal energy to the cooler atmosphere. This causes it to cool off and condense, turning back into liquid water and forming clouds. Precipitation is water falling back to Earth's surface in the form of rain, snow, sleet, or hail. Some of that water is absorbed into the ground as groundwater. Some is absorbed by living things, including plants through their roots and animals when they drink. The rest of the water collects on Earth's surface in the ocean, lakes, and rivers, where it moves downhill, pulled by the force of Earth's gravity. This circulation of water through the hydrosphere from Earth's surface to the atmosphere and back is called the water cycle. The water cycle connects all of Earth's systems, and water moves from one state to another. It is complex and it varies in different parts of the world and at different times of year, depending on the amount of thermal energy from the sun. For example, most of the fresh water on Earth is stored in glaciers and ice caps when it can remain frozen for thousands of years. In contrast, in hot climates and seasons, precipitation sometimes evaporates just seconds after it falls to Earth's surface. Sugar maples on the move. Because of the different ways that Earth's surface is heated, as well as the cycling of water around the planet, there are complex variables that influence Earth's temperature at any given time. For example, it depends on how much solar radiation is reflected back out to space and how much is absorbed. If Earth's temperature cools, causing more snow and ice to form, more solar radiation will be reflected back out to space, which will make the climate even cooler. When the planet begins to warm, causing snow and ice to melt, darker colored surfaces and oceans are exposed. As a result, less solar energy is reflected out to space, causing the warming to increase. These are called feedback loops, changes in the climate that cause an impact that changes the climate further. In recent years, Earth's temperature has been warming. This rise in global average temperature near Earth's surface is called global warming. Some scientists are interested in how global warming is affecting living things. For example, in one study, scientists looked at 15 northern species of trees, including the sugar maple. They focused on where young trees are growing compared to older trees. They did this by looking at the latitudes of the two groups of trees. They found that the young trees of 11 of the 15 species are now growing 20 kilometers or 12 miles farther north, on average, compared to the older trees. Within those species, the sugar maple tree has moved more than the average. Young sugar maple trees are now growing as much as 50 kilometers or 30 miles farther north compared to the older trees. Scientists believe that global warming is the likely explanation for why younger trees are now growing farther north than the older trees. They depend on cooler temperatures to survive, so seeds that are carried north by wind, water, or animals are more likely to survive and grow into trees than seeds in the now warmer locations. Section 2. Global Patterns, Local Effects. The blizzard of 2015. In January 2015, New York City did something it had never done before. It shut down the subway system because of the weather forecast. A powerful storm was moving toward Canada and the central and eastern United States. In response, 6 U.S. states declared a snow emergency, and 4 states banned all travel except emergency vehicles. Thousands of flights were canceled, as were many schools around the region. The decision to shut down New York City subway was controversial because more than 4 million people use the subway every day. People became angry because the storm ended up dropping much less snow in New York City than had been predicted. This blizzard showed how difficult weather forecasting can be. Some news outlets called the difference between the forecast and the actual snow amounts in New York City one of the most famous forecasting busts of the 21st century. However, many forecasters and other scientists have said that overall, the forecasting was pretty good. Models showed that there was going to be an extremely powerful storm, and there was. The problem came down to the storm's exact path. For example, forecasting for central Massachusetts was spot on, with the region receiving record-breaking amounts of snow. However, forecasters predicted that New York City would fall within the western boundary of the storm. In the end, the city was outside the storm's western boundary. Weather and climate. The blizzard of 2015 was one kind of weather event. Weather is the conditions of the atmosphere in a particular place at a particular time. Temperature, humidity, wind speed, air pressure, and precipitation are all parts of weather. Climate is an average of the weather in a location over 30 years or more. The uneven heating of Earth's surfaces, along with the cycling of water around the planet, are major drivers of weather and climate on Earth. Weather and climate on Earth are very complex, influenced by a variety of different factors. However, the fundamental cause is that heat always seeks equilibrium. It does this by transferring from warmer substances to cooler substances until the two substances are the same temperature. Because the sun heats Earth unevenly, heat is constantly transferred from warmer locations to cooler locations seeking equilibrium. This transfer of heat around the planet regulates Earth's climate. Without it, regions near the equator would be much hotter, while regions near the poles would be much colder. Ocean currents are one way that heat is transferred around the planet. Deep ocean currents transfer heat through a form of heat transfer called convection, where warmer, less dense fluid rises, allowing cooler, dense fluid to take its place. Ocean currents push warm and cold water to different parts of the planet. Cold, dense water in the oceans sinks deep and spread out all around the world. The sinking water is replaced by warm, less dense water near the surface that moves to the north. Transferring heat. Wind is also caused by convection. Wind is moving air, and it occurs as a result of heat being transferred from the sun to Earth's surface and then from the surface to the air above it. When air is heated, its molecules spread out. This decreases the density of the air, causing it to rise. At the same time, cooler, denser air sinks. Because of interactions between the hydrosphere and the atmosphere, the water cycle also plays a role in transferring heat around the planet. Remember that molecules of water vapor carry thermal energy, or heat. As those molecules spread out into the atmosphere, they begin to transfer some of that energy into the atmosphere, which is cooler. This transfer of heat causes the water vapor to cool off, condensing back into liquid water and forming clouds. The condensation transfers heat to the atmosphere, which warms the cooler air. This causes the warmed air to rise, making space for more humid, warm air from the ocean below. As this cycle of heat transfer between the ocean and the atmosphere continues, more moist, warm air is drawn upward and more heat is transferred from the ocean to the atmosphere. That heat is then transferred to colder parts of the planet by wind. Moving air. Wind moves from high pressure to low pressure areas, similar to how high pressure air rushes from the mouth of an inflated balloon when you let go. In addition to transferring heat and moving storms across the planet, wind is also the primary driver of surface ocean currents. However, air and surface ocean currents don't move in a straight line between the equator and the poles. Instead, they are affected by Earth's rotation. As Earth rotates around its axis, the movement causes air to move in curved paths. This is called the Coriolis effect. In the northern hemisphere, warm air around the equator rises and flows toward the North Pole. Because of the Coriolis effect, the warm air is pushed to the right, or northeast, where it begins to cool. As it cools, it increases in pressure as it increases in pressure as its density increases. This causes some of the air to move lower in the atmosphere, where it blows from the northeast to the southwest, back toward the equator. A similar wind pattern happens in the southern hemisphere, but opposite. Because of the Coriolis effect, the warm air is pushed southeast, where it begins to cool. As it cools, it increases in pressure and its density increases. This causes the air to move lower in the atmosphere, where it blows from the southeast toward the northwest, back toward the equator. These winds in both hemispheres are the trade winds. Not all of the warm air lowers in the atmosphere, however. The remaining air continues toward the poles. These winds in both hemispheres are called the westerlies. These global winds, both the trade winds and the westerlies, also push against the ocean's surface. This creates surface ocean currents that move to the right in the northern hemisphere in a clockwise spiral and to the left in the southern hemisphere in a counterclockwise spiral. The ocean currents are also affected by the outlines of Earth's continents as they transport heat from the equator to the poles. Air masses. Earth's surface also interacts with air as heat and moisture are exchanged between the two. When a large mass of air remains over part of Earth for many days, it begins to take on the characteristics of the surface below it because heat and moisture are transferred between the surface and the atmosphere. These large bodies of air are called air masses, and the entire body of air has a similar temperature and humidity throughout. Scientists classify air masses into one of 5 categories based on the temperature of the air mass and how much moisture it has. The first part of an air masses category tells whether the air mass formed over land or water. Continental air masses are marked with a C, and they form over land. Because of this, the air is dry. In contrast, maritime air masses, M, form over oceans. These air masses are full of water vapor that has evaporated from the water below. The second part of an air masses category tells where the air mass formed relative to the equator. Tropical air masses, or T, form near the equator, where the air is warmed as heat transfers from the land or water. Polar air masses, P, form in higher latitudes, where the air becomes cool because heat transfers from the air to the colder land or water. In the winter, Arctic air masses, A, form near the north and south poles. Air masses move with the global wind patterns. At the same time, the air masses move around the planet in an effort to redistribute the heat. The cold air masses move south toward warmer temperatures, while warm air masses move north toward cooler temperatures. However, the surface features of the land can cause an air mass to change its path. For example, air masses are often deflected when they collide with mountains. As air masses move, they carry with them their temperature and moisture. However, as an air mass moves over Earth's surface, the changing characteristics of the surface can change the air mass. For example, when a continental polar air mass moves over warm water, heat and moisture from the warm water will transfer from the water surface to the air nearest the surface. As air masses move, they can also collide with other air masses. The boundary between 2 air masses is called a front. When a front passes over a location, the weather in that location will change. Remember that warm air rises and cold air sinks. This behavior is true for air masses as well, and it is what causes the different kinds of fronts. For example, a cold front occurs when a cold air mass replaces a warm air mass. When a cold air mass collides with a warm air mass, the cold air mass will sink underneath the warm air mass, pushing the warm air upwards. This happens very quickly because the cold air mass is so much denser than the warm air mass. As a result, it pushes the warm air up into the atmosphere, where the warm air quickly loses heat to the atmosphere. This causes the water vapor in the atmosphere to cool off and condense, forming clouds and precipitation. Because of this, cold fronts often produce powerful storms. They are represented on a weather map by a solid blue line with triangles pointing in the direction of its movement. Temperatures in front of the cold front are warmer than temperatures behind it. When a warm air mass replaces a cold air mass, it is called a warm front. When this happens, the warm air mass gradually moves over the cold air mass. Because this occurs much more slowly than a cold front, there aren't usually strong storms associated with warm fronts. Instead, light rain or snow is more common, followed by milder temperatures. Warm fronts are represented on a weather map by a solid red line with semicircles pointing in the direction of its movement. Temperatures in front of the warm front are cooler than temperatures behind it. Sometimes when a warm air mass collides with a cold air mass, neither mass is powerful enough to move the other. The cold air mass pushes against the warm air mass, but the warm air mass pushes back equally. The result is a stationary front. This can result in clouds that can remain for days at a time. Eventually, the front will either break apart or begin moving again. It turns into a warm front if the warm air moves forward, pushing the cold air. It turns into a cold front if the cold air mass moves forward instead. The last kind of front is called an occluded front. This occurs when a cold front follows right behind a warm front. The warm front occurs when a warm air mass replaces a cold air mass. When another cold air mass pushes into the warm air mass, it is usually moving faster than the warm air mass. Because of this, the second cold air mass runs into the cool air that was ahead of the warm front. The warm air is pushed up and precipitation often occurs. An occluded front is represented with a purple line with half triangles and half semicircles along pointing in the direction that the front is moving. High and low pressure systems. Weather maps also often indicate high and low pressure systems. A high pressure system is noted with a blue H, and a low pressure system is noted with a red L. A high pressure system has higher pressure at its center. Because of this, it is characterized by sunny and clear skies. This can be understood by thinking about heat transfer and the water cycle. The air in a high-pressure system sinks down from above because air always moves from high-pressure areas to low-pressure areas. As it moves lower in the atmosphere, it becomes warmer and drier. The winds in a high-pressure system blow clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere because of Earth's rotation and the Coriolis effect. A low-pressure system has lower pressure at its center than the areas around it. It is characterized by clouds and precipitation. This is because warm air near Earth's surface rises into the atmosphere. As it moves upward, it cools and condenses, forming clouds and precipitation. Winds in a low-pressure system move opposite from a high-pressure system. They move counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. Complex interactions. Scientists called meteorologists use powerful supercomputers to gather information about weather conditions around the planet. Because weather conditions in one location are affected by conditions in distant regions, there are thousands of weather stations positioned around the world, constantly gathering data about the weather. Weather stations include temperature sensors, wind gauges, and rain collectors. As a result of all of these stations, more than 1 million weather-related observations are made every single day. Those calculations all feed into supercomputers that perform millions of calculations every second in an effort to predict weather conditions over time. It is these predictions that most weather channels and meteorologists around the country use in their weather forecasts. And yet, despite the many weather stations around the world, weather forecast remains an inexact science, as was shown in New York during the 2015 blizzard. A sudden storm can catch even the most diligent forecaster off guard. This is because even a small change to any one variable can have dramatic effects on Earth's weather. Forecasters have to predict how exactly the sun will heat each part of Earth's surface, how that heat will influence the water cycle, how differences in air pressure will affect wind patterns, and how the planet's rotation will affect the movement of air and water. Section 3, the greenhouse effect, studying Earth's atmosphere. Scientists have turned an airplane into a moving laboratory. This plane has 20 scientific instruments, and it will spend the summer of 2016 flying around the world. Its mission is to take samples of Earth's atmosphere. It will start in California and then fly to the equator and back. After that, it will fly to the North Pole, then to the tropics, the Southern Ocean around Antarctica, and across to the southern tip of South America before flying north toward Greenland. After Greenland, it will cross North America on its way back to California. The goal of this study is to learn more about Earth's atmosphere. Most of Earth's atmosphere is made up of just two gases, nitrogen, 78%, and oxygen, 21%. A third gas, argon, makes up about 1% of the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane are also found in the atmosphere, but in such small quantities they are called trace gases. Scientists are interested in Earth's atmosphere because it plays a major role in regulating Earth's climate. This is because the trace gases have a major impact on warming Earth, even though they make up such a small percentage of the atmosphere. They act in a similar way to the glass walls of a greenhouse, trapping thermal energy from the sun. For this reason, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane are called greenhouse gases. Earth's atmosphere traps heat. The trapped energy from the greenhouse gases is essential for life. Greenhouse gases make Earth a livable 14 degrees Celsius or 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Without greenhouse gases, scientists estimate that Earth's surface would be too cold for life at negative 19 degrees Celsius or negative 2 degrees Fahrenheit. When the sun transfers energy to Earth, it is in a form called visible light. After Earth's surface absorbs some of the sun's energy, it re-emits that energy, but not as visible light because the Earth is much cooler than the sun. Instead, the energy is released as a different form of light energy called infrared radiation. We can't see it, but we feel it as heat. Greenhouse gases in the atmosphere absorb this outgoing infrared radiation because they are bonded loosely together. This loose bonding causes them to vibrate when they absorb energy. In contrast, nitrogen and oxygen molecules are so tightly bonded together that they cannot vibrate, which is why they do not absorb energy or contribute to the greenhouse effect. Scientists involved in the flying laboratory want to study Earth's atmosphere to get a better understanding of how greenhouse gases enter into the atmosphere, how they change the atmosphere, and in the end, how are they removed from the atmosphere. This is important for researchers who want to understand Earth's climate today and in the future. This is particularly important because scientists believe that human activities have caused Earth's climate to change. Scientists know that Earth has experienced global warming in the last 100 years, with its temperature increasing by 0.6 degrees Celsius or 1 degree Fahrenheit. They don't know exactly why, but many believe that the increasing amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are responsible. There are many factors that cause the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere to change. For example, water in clouds holds in some of the heat from Earth's surface because water vapor is the most common greenhouse gas, accounting for more than half of all greenhouse gases. But the bright white tops of clouds also reflect some of the sunlight back to space, helping to cool Earth's surface. Scientists are still trying to figure out how much clouds affect the warming or cooling of Earth's surface. Sudden events, such as volcanic eruption or a forest fire, can also impact the climate. Volcanic eruptions send ash particles into the environment, blocking sunlight from reaching Earth's surface. This contributes to Earth's cooling. However, volcanoes also release carbon dioxide, which over millions of years cause warming. Forest fires release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But if a forest regrows after the fire, the trees and other plants will remove about the same amount of carbon dioxide that was released into the environment during the burning. Scientists believe that in recent decades, the most dramatic influence on Earth's climate has been human activities, primarily the burning of fossil fuels for energy. As fuels are burned, carbon dioxide is released back into the environment. The sudden release of all of this carbon dioxide into the environment upsets the balance of the carbon cycle, which naturally regulates the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Just like water, carbon is constantly cycling through Earth. This carbon cycle is the circulation and transformation of carbon back and forth between living things and the environment. The carbon cycle is highly complex. Anything that releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is a source. Anything that absorbs and holds carbon dioxide from the air or water is considered a sink. Oceans and forests are carbon sinks because they hold tremendous amounts of carbon. Volcanoes and fires are carbon sources because they release carbon back into the atmosphere. All living things contain carbon. Oxygen and carbon are closely connected, and both cycle through the planet. Plants are carbon sinks because they take carbon dioxide and sunlight from the atmosphere to make their own food and grow through photosynthesis, and then release oxygen through respiration. Animals breathe in the oxygen and release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. When living things die, they store the carbon. Over millions of years, their remains become buried and can turn into fossil fuels such as coal, natural gas, or oil, still holding that carbon. Over geologic time, carbon dioxide sources and sinks generally balance through the carbon cycle. However, when humans burn fossil fuels, the carbon that was stored in all those plants and animals over hundreds of millions of years is released back into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide faster than natural processes can remove it. Even though carbon dioxide is not the only greenhouse gas, many scientists are very concerned about it because humans release so much of it into the atmosphere. There are many factors that influence how much carbon dioxide people put into the atmosphere. One factor is geography. Developed countries, such as the United States, tend to burn more fossil fuels than less developed countries, such as India. Other factors include population growth, economic growth, new technologies such as renewable fuels, changing behaviors, and seasonal temperatures. For example, China is now the world's largest emitter of carbon dioxide, and its emissions are expected to rise, in part because of its huge population. In 2005, Chinese emissions were lower than those of the United States. Sometime between 2013 and 2015, they are expected to be twice as large as US emissions. The United States is the second largest emitter, but it has been reducing its greenhouse gas emissions. India is another developing country with a huge population, yet it emits less than the European Union. Studying climate change. There are many questions that remain unanswered about how Earth is changing and what the impacts of warmer temperatures will be. Global warming leads to other changes, such as stronger hurricanes, melting glaciers, and the loss of wildlife habitats. These changes are called climate change, and they happen because Earth's air, water, and land are all related to one another and to the climate. A change in one place can lead to changes in other places. For example, as Earth gets warmer, more water evaporates from the surface, becoming water vapor, a greenhouse gas. More water vapor in the atmosphere leads to even more warming, which will lead to more evaporation, which will lead to more warming. Scientists are still trying to understand how this feedback loop impacts global warming. Many scientists around the world are studying different aspects of climate change to try to better understand how all of Earth's systems work together. One example of this is the researchers focusing on how warmer temperatures affect the latitude in which plants, such as sugar maples, are found. This is because many climate scientists are worried that climate change will significantly alter weather systems around the planet. This can make life more difficult for living things, which will have to adapt to the rapid changes or risk becoming extinct. What engineers do. Now that climate scientists have identified the problem of climate change and understand possible causes, some engineers are trying to come up with solutions to slow Earth's warming. In fact, climate change has been identified as one of engineers' grand challenges. Engineers are often seen as the link between scientific discoveries and how they are used in the real world. The inventions that engineers design can be new or can improve on existing technology. There are several fields of engineering that focus on designing different kinds of structures or technologies. Environmental engineers are looking for ways to take carbon out of the atmosphere and store it so it will not contribute to climate change. Mechanical, chemical, and electrical engineers are exploring renewable sources of energy, as well as more energy efficient designs for buildings, vehicles, and appliances. Designing a greenhouse. Engineers have already designed technologies that apply scientific knowledge about heat transfer and Earth's climate. For example, steps inside a greenhouse, and one of the first things you're likely to notice is that the temperature inside is much warmer than the temperature outside. Even on wintry days, greenhouses are usually filled with a variety of plants, including different kinds of flowers and vegetables. Behind the scenes, engineers have worked to make sure that the temperature can be maintained. If the weather outside changes dramatically, plant growers operating the greenhouse can monitor the change the amount of heat, light, and water their plants are getting. The design of a greenhouse plays an important role in how well it is able to regulate the temperatures inside. Radiant heat from the sun enters the greenhouse through its transparent covering of glass or plastic and starts to warm the objects, soil, and plants inside. The heated surface warms the air above it. As the air heats up, it begins to rise, and through convection, cooler air fills its space. That cooler air becomes heated as well. Because the greenhouse is tightly sealed, all of the air inside remains relatively warm. If even a small window is open, the temperature will drop. Greenhouses can also become humid because of plant transpiration, which releases water vapor into the atmosphere. Some greenhouse owners experiment with inexpensive ways to increase heat, such as painting containers black to absorb heat and filling them with water to keep the heat. Most engineers also use positioning the greenhouse where it will get the most direct sunlight. When an engineer designs a greenhouse, they research the specific needs of that particular greenhouse. For example, what kind of plants will be grown, and what is their ideal temperature range? How many plants will be grown, and how much space do they need to grow? What is the climate of the location like, and how much sun does that location usually get? How much do the various materials cost? The world's largest greenhouse. The world's largest greenhouse is located in Great Britain and houses thousands of plant species from all over the world. Called the Eden Project, it is home to two massive greenhouses consisting of adjoining domes. The first dome recreates the climate of tropical rainforests, while the second dome recreates the climate of Mediterranean farms. The first designs of the Eden Project were drawn up on a napkin. Over time, the design evolved to mimic giant bubbles because of bubbles' ability to settle anywhere, regardless of whether the surface is flat or uneven. The engineers also wanted to use the fewest possible materials when building the domes, so they decided to look to nature for inspiration. When bees build honeycombs, they always build perfect hexagons, where each of the 6 sides is the same size. This design provides for a strong structure with minimal materials, so the designers of the Eden Project decided to use hexagonal shapes to form the domes. The different biomes are designed to keep the inside air temperatures within a very specific range. Engineers used a variety of methods to achieve this. For example, the domes are made of a double-layered insulating material that traps air in between the 2 layers, acting as a thermal blanket. The result is thousands of plant species from all over the world growing in a carefully engineered environment. Well, I really learned a lot reading Earth's Changing Climate. I hope that you did too. I'll see you tomorrow with another one. Bye!